Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Addiction Free Naturally podcast. My name's Graeme Hoppitt. So welcome to you wherever you are in the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening. For me, it's actually, as I record this, it's Saturday afternoon in Metro Manila in the Philippines. So welcome. Today I'm going to talk about plans, habits, routines and rituals and how they impact your recovery, how you can use all of these elements to overcome your addiction. This is a fabulous session for anyone who isn't an addict as well. I mean, this is a game changer. Certainly on one of the particular aspects, it's literally a game changer. So let's get stuck in. So I'm going to talk about plans, habits, routines, rituals, how they all fit together, the difference really, and the most effective planning system that I've personally ever come across. If only I was aware of this when I was back in my corporate days all those years ago. So there's real lessons here today. Let's get going. So let's escape that prison of addiction. So how do we do that? Well, we know from the start that everything is a habit, yeah? Now, everything that you have in your life, everything that you don't have in your life, is actually a result of habits. You know, you've created habits for what you want, and you've also created habits for what you don't want. You know, we all have habits in our daily routine, don't we? You know, personal and work related. You know, it's a habit to check your email every day, to check your Facebook every 5 minutes, Instagram or whatever it is. It's a habit to kiss your partner as you go out the door to work, or to kiss your children at night as you go to bed. They're all habits. You know, we can start doing something one day, and over time, you know, that action becomes so ingrained in our subconscious mind that we don't even think about anymore. It's literally a habit that we've developed without knowing anything about it. The easiest habit we know is maybe that cup of coffee in the morning if you're coffee drinking. That's just an example. But we know for sure that, you know, addiction is a deeply rooted habit. You know, that is a habit which is compulsive. Healthy habits are learned in the same way as unhealthy habits, through practice. That's a great quote by the late, great Wayne Dyer. Fabulous. You know, if you're waking up every day just hoping to survive, you know, one more day without relapse, that's not going to work, is it? That's just like a wish. What we're going to talk about is how you can use habits as part of your routine to really overcome your addiction. There's a quote I want to start with by Benjamin Franklin. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. I mean, those in business may have heard this multiple times already. I mean, I certainly have known this quote for years, but it is actually the foundation. You know, if you haven't got a plan, you're stuck. And I think one of the blessings of addiction, certainly for me, is what I've learned on my journey out of addiction. Because some of what I'm going to share today, you know, I did not know before I actually went through the process of overcoming my addiction. So, you know, I've learned so much, and there's a flip side to everything. There's a good and bad on everything. And the blessing for me of addiction is I've learned so much information coming out of it. So the great question to start with is, how do you manage your time? Because the number one reason that I personally see addicts failing is a lack of any plan. If you haven't got that plan, you're gonna fail. Your plan is part of your vision. And we spoke about vision in a previous podcast, didn't we? I think it was podcast number 7. We spoke about your vision and also what your why was, because your why is going to sustain you on your journey of overcoming addiction. So, you know, when it gets really tough, that's why you need your why. So your vision itself is what's going to empower you to own new goals. And the primary goal is to overcome your addiction, which you can absolutely do. Your vision really is the starting point for any achievement in life, not just addiction recovery. It's your roadmap out of addiction. So you need a daily plan that's going to give you the steps to overcome your addiction. And willpower is not a plan. So for those that are trying to overcome their addiction by willpower, it's not going to happen. It's a finite resource. You're going to run out. So a plan with actionable steps is what's going to see you through. So I'm going to share with you now really one of the game changers in my life. Now, the 12-week year, you might have heard of it before. I don't know, but there's a great book about it, and the book is by Brian Moran and a guy called Michael Lennington. It works on the basis of Parkinson's law. You know, it's that old adage that work expands to fill time allotted. You know, put simply, what that means is the amount of work required adjusts, you know, usually increasingly to the time available you have. And most of us have probably set New Year's resolutions at some point in our life. And we know that often we get to the end of the year and we've not done anything. Often we've given them up fairly easily. Now, by having a 12-week year, as this system is called, it really is focusing your mind. You know, because it really highlights how do you manage your time. And discipline is a key part of that. You know, what comes to mind for you when you actually hear the word discipline? You know, is it restrictive? Does it limit your freedom? Is it to be avoided at all costs? You know, most people do avoid discipline because, well, one, it's difficult. You know, it may feel like constraining, you know, it may feel like it's taking your freedom away. However, when we shun discipline, you know, we end up creating the very thing we're trying to avoid. You know, the only way to be truly free and to create what we want in our life is by embracing discipline. And in discipline is part of your plan. It comes as part of your plan. So when we avoid discipline, we're actually creating the stress in our lives that we're trying to get rid of. And by having discipline and by having a plan is how you can absolutely overcome addiction. So I'm going to give you now the reasons why I personally love the 12-week year concept and why I avidly use it in my life now. First of all, it eliminates annualized thinking. So it gets away from that sort of like annual goals. And by doing that, it creates a sense of urgency, because when you've got an annual goal, you often get to the end of the year, you're despondent because you haven't achieved anything. But by having these quarterly goals, these 12-week goals, it really creates urgency. It promotes execution. And execution, really, what does that mean? It means you stop talking about it, put it into action. And because you're condensing something into a 12-week period, it really focuses the mind, because effective execution starts to happen weekly, well, even daily, actually. So it can happen weekly, daily, weekly, monthly, because you need to be sharper to achieve your 12-week goals than you would if you were trying to do it over a year. And the whole essence of this process developed by Brian Moran is you are going to achieve more in your life. And that's why it's particularly relevant to addicts, because if you start to focus your attention into a smaller time frame, you will achieve your escape from addiction, you know, eradicating addiction from your life that much quicker. Now, what I'm not trying to do here is I'm not trying to teach you the whole system. I'm going to give you an overview, but it's certainly going to be enough for you to go away and start implementing this into your life, like straight away. Right, so it also forces you to be more focused, which I think I mentioned anyway. You know, focus is key, and it's going to come about by the fact you've got a 12-week plan rather than a 52-week plan. Because if you want a great 12-week year, you know, you can't afford many bad weeks, can you? And that's the whole thing. Again, it comes back to the urgency, it comes back to the focus. And also there's greater predictability, because when you start to see maybe after a couple of weeks, well, I'm not quite going as I want, you can put more emphasis on it. It becomes, over a period of these 12 weeks, you can start to see predictable results happening for you in your life generally. Because what I would urge you to do is, once you've done this and use this as your method to get out of addiction, you can use it in your life going forward. It's phenomenal. It's what I use in my life and my business now every day. So I'm going to start giving you the details, some more specific details. So that you set a goal, your outcome, whatever you want to call it. So, our goal, if we're here as addicts, would be to say, be addiction free in 90 days. Now, some of you are thinking, well, that's not even possible, but it absolutely is possible. I've done it. Thousands of people have done it. So let's just set that as a goal right now, to be addiction free in 90 days. And then you would list out your tactics. So before we go into detail, let's really just focus on that. If you're here struggling with addiction right now, why don't you set a really worthy goal to overcome your addiction in 90 days and to have the mental mastery to live your life addiction free forever? Because there's two parts here, isn't there? Overcoming the addiction is one thing, but you've got to be able to sustain it. And to be able to sustain it, you do need the ability to master your thoughts. You need the mental mastery so you can divert your attention when cravings come along. Yeah, so that is a worthy goal. Overcome addiction within 90 days and have the mental mastery to live your life addiction free. So I would urge you to adopt that right now if you're struggling with addiction. Let's get into some detail. So, like, you've set your goal, addiction free in 90 days. So then you need to list some of your tactics. What are your tactics? How are you going to become addiction free? Because you can't do it on willpower. Yeah, willpower can play a minute part in it, but you've got to have proper tactics. How are you going to do it? So maybe I'm just giving some examples here. What are the daily routines that you could do every single day? And we're going to talk about routines in a minute separately, but what are the daily routines which you could do every day, which should empower you to remove, say, all the trigger points in your life? And that could be two things in it. Actually, you could have, what are your daily routines which will empower you? And separately, you can go and remove all the trigger points in your life. Maybe you're going to attend 12-step meetings. What about hypnotherapy? That is a fabulous method of therapy. That is what helped me tremendously. That has absolutely transformed my life. Coaching is another way. I use coaching and hypnotherapy. That's how I actually help my clients. How about learning about your mind, or learning about the science in addiction recovery? That you're not just trying to do it on a whim and a prayer, but you're learning the science behind it, neuroscience, neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. Maybe another tactic is removing the toxins from your body, because if you're filling your body up with crap food and other stuff, that in itself is going to make you more available, shall we say, to triggers, because we need to keep our bodies as pure as possible. Now, I'm not sitting here saying I don't have anything that has got any toxins in it, but I mean, I'm always working towards making progress. Exercise is another one. That's a great tactic. Now, if we start to do exercise, you're going to start to feel fitter mentally and physically. So these are just examples. So you need to not only have your goal, your worthy goal, but you've got to have tactics. Does that make sense? So these were just some examples. Then what you need to do, you obviously need to start planning specifically around the tactics. And by that, I mean, let's say you've set the tactic as daily routines. Well, one of your tactics is daily routines. Another one is remove your triggers. When is that due by? You really have got to be accountable. So, like on this example, let's say I'm going to start my daily routines, and really I should have those all in place by the end of the first week. So I'm going to begin it in week 1. I'd expect to finish it in week 1. Yeah, and then I would mark it off. So I'd have a little chart where I list this and mark it off, and maybe remove triggers is another one that, I'm going to say that has to be done by the end of week 1. I begin it in week 1, and I'm going to finish it in week 1, and then I would mark it off on my chart. And let's say, I am going to take hypnotherapy. I mean, get some hypnotherapy sessions done. Maybe I'm not going to start that till, say, week 2. And because the therapist might be saying I might need 2 or 3 sessions, whatever, I don't know, depends on the consultation. But let's say I'm starting in week 2, but I'm not going to finish it till week 11, let's say. I'm doing it over 9 weeks or whatever. I'm just giving this as examples. I'm not saying that's what would be the case. So then when I finished it, it'd be completed in week 11. Maybe I'm going to go to 12-step meetings as my tactic. So I'm going to start that in week 2 because I'm going to investigate where they are, and lots of them are obviously online these days. So I'm starting in week 2, but I haven't actually there's not a finish date for that, because obviously the 12 steps is like a lifetime commitment. So therefore, that's an ongoing timeline sort of thing. Maybe another tactic, you're going to rehab. And I'm going to investigate. I can't start it till week 6. It's a 4-week in-house rehabilitation program, so I'd finish it in week 10. So by planning all this and by putting it into some sort of chart, making it accountable, you've got more chance of being successful. Yeah, I mean, this is what I do on everything in life now. And it gives me more freedom. It doesn't constrain me. On the contrary, I've got more free time because I'm planning, and I've got a clear plan. And when I mark it off, it gives me a load more time than the old way of doing things. Now, an example of a normal weekly plan would be, you can have obviously you can buy 12-week planners. You'll find lots on Amazon. I'm going to be transparent. I haven't got a 12-week planner, a bought one. What I personally got is just a notepad, and I have a page for each day. So I've created my own. And the reason I've done that is I'm in the Philippines and I can't get a 12-week planner here, and I refuse to pay the exorbitant shipping just to get one here without knowing what it really looks like. I like to look at something and see what it's like. So I've created my own. So I've just got a loose leaf notepad, and I've got a day for each thing. And then what I would do, I would then have my diary and plan it out. So like you put your hours in and you put your work times in, etc. But the more you plan your week and then your day, the better. Yeah, is that making sense? So an example of a day plan. First of all, what I would do is obviously I've set my date and I know which week I'm in. So, right now I'm in week 2 of my current 13-week plan. And I always set my top 3 priorities for the day. So my top 3 priorities, let's say today are, I'm seeing a client, Jack, today. And I'm also doing one of my monthly rituals, which is I'm doing a 4 hours of silence. And I'll talk about that when I actually get there in a second. And then the other thing is, which is my top priority today, is I've got to prep for a meeting that I've got next week. So they are my 3 top priorities. It doesn't mean they're the only 3 things I'm doing. I'm also going to do some training, and I've got to do my accounts. But by at least knowing what your top 3 priorities are, if you get those done, you've had a damn good day, haven't you? So it's like, be clear on what you're trying to achieve in your day. And the 4 hours of silence I do, which I've now been doing, this is my 8th month I've been doing it. I haven't always been doing this. I've done 8 months consecutively. And before I used to do it every now and again. And it's like a technique. It's like I do daily meditation anyway, which I think I mentioned or have definitely mentioned in previous podcasts. But now I do a 4 hours once a month. And that really helps to calm my mind down and gives me the space to make much more intuitive decisions in the long run. And I want to just remind ourselves, so the purpose we're doing all of this is going back to Benjamin Franklin's quote, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So I cannot stress enough the need to really take planning seriously. So that was the 12-week year. So I hope I've given you enough there to really get you going. And I cannot stress how it has transformed my life, actually having doing my plans on a 12-week basis rather than an annual basis. You're still going to have your annual vision, but by breaking it down, changes your life. It seriously does. Okay, rituals and routines are also part of that overall plan, and you would have them planned in. Let's talk about routines. Routines require deliberate practice. They are, why the word habit and routine sometimes are used interchangeable. They are both distinctly different. The main difference between a habit and a routine is how much aware and intentional you are. So a routine becomes a deliberate practice. Habits usually, they usually manifest as automatic urges to do something, obviously often triggered by a particular cue. The stronger the connection between the trigger and the habit, the more ingrained the habit. Addiction, right? Yeah. By way of an explanation, waking up, commuting, walking past maybe a particular shop in the morning, such as Starbucks, or a morning break at work, they're common cues that can trigger a coffee, or maybe smoking a cigarette if you're a cigarette smoker. Whereas by contrast, routines require deliberate practice. Going to the gym or meditating, as I do, they are both routines, although I've now created that into a ritual, which we're going to come on to in a minute, but it's a routine. It's like a daily routine for me. And that requires us to consciously practice. You're not going to automatically do meditation every day. It's like you have to get into it. You have to build that up. So it's not triggered by walking past a coffee shop or by your mid-morning break in the way that maybe a coffee or a cigarette would be triggered. But when you're committed enough and you use the right techniques, obviously, that you can turn those routines into habits, as I've done. Yeah, so it's not automatic, it's an unconscious process, but you can practice it and make it automatic. And it's worth me mentioning, therefore, the habit loop, because the habit loop, something is going to be the cue. So the cue would be maybe walking past that coffee shop or getting out of bed. And therefore, the routine is you then grab a coffee, and the reward is obviously drinking it. You've got something you like, and that gives you a dopamine hit. So that is what a habit loop is. It's 3 parts: cue, routine, reward. And you can start to create that yourself. So you choose a trigger which tells your brain to start a particular routine, and then the routine, and you want to start with sort of small actionable chunks, that's the routine you want, and you need to have a reward at the end of it. So every habit has got a cue, a routine, and a reward in it. There's a thing called habit stacking. What you can start to do is, and it was designed by a professor whose name, I think it's Professor Fogg. And this approach consists in where you take baby steps by anchoring a new tiny habit to an already existing one. Yeah, and an example could be like, after you sit down for dinner, which is a habit, so you sit down for dinner each night, that's your habit 1, and then you're going to say as habit 2, I will say one thing I'm grateful for. So maybe you're creating this gratitude habit, and you've linked it to sitting down to dinner. So before you eat, you say something you're grateful for. That would be an example of habit stacking. Now, rituals, so they are routines we talk about. Now, rituals are a way to set your day up for success, in my opinion. Rituals are done with deliberate intention and concentration, or certainly to start with. By making something into a ritual, we give it focus. We when we choose our habits and repeat them, they can really become rituals. So one of my rituals, I'm going to give you some examples in a minute, but is meditation. I've made it a ritual. And the rituals are foundations upon which we can achieve great things. And obviously a great thing that you guys and girls want to achieve is overcoming addiction. So if you ritualize certain things during your day which are going to help you in overcoming addiction, you're going to get a great result. Now, just some examples, applying mindfulness to some daily routines is a great way to start creating rituals. Now, one thing I had when I done as a ritual when I was in the UK was I woke up for a cold shower. I had a cold shower every day. I stood under the freezing cold water for 3 minutes. And now I can't do that in the Philippines because the water just isn't cold enough. I mean, I do have a cold shower, but it's not the same effect that the cold shower in the UK would have. I mean, there's lots of scientific evidence that having a cold shower can help you. So I made that into a ritual. Now, other rituals, another ritual within the shower though could be to really just focus on your body and be grateful while you're showering for every part of your body. Now, I do that now, but I couldn't do that when I was having a freezing cold shower in the UK. Does that make sense? So my rituals were different. My ritual in the UK was to have a cold shower, freezing cold shower, because of the medical benefits that it has apparently on you. But here, my ritual, obviously I have a shower to keep clean, but my ritual is to focus on different parts of my body to give gratitude for different parts of my body. Another ritual you can make is actually maybe to eat slower, because you become more mindful of your eating, and that has a different effect on how you'll be satiated by your food. So you can take a habit into a routine and then ultimately into a ritual. So there's 3 steps. You create your habit, you're turning it into a routine, and then by focused attention, it becomes a ritual. So for me, meditation, I can't live without it. It's like second only to oxygen. So here's some examples of some of my daily rituals that I currently have. Meditation, I do 20 to 30 minutes every day. I do some hypnotherapy on myself. I do self-love. I may only do that for a minute. You different stages of your life, you change it, or different stages of when you're escaping addiction. I mean, when I was in the early days, I was doing a self-love routine for 5 or 10 minutes a day. I personally now have a ritual of stretching every day and exercising 4 or 5 days a week. So I've got different rituals that serve me. Yours could be completely different. You've got to find and create rituals that serve you. A weekly ritual I have is self-love. So I will always, at least once a week, do a 5-minute session on self-love. And a monthly ritual is my 4 hours of silence that I've mentioned before. So I've got different rituals that I use daily, weekly, and monthly. So I urge you to think, what are the rituals that could really serve you to enable you to overcome addiction, and specifically to enable you to overcome addiction in a 12-week month, 12-week year, so that you're never addicted again. Which rituals will serve you in that worthy goal? Yeah, so what would really help you to overcome addiction within 90 days and have the mental mastery to live your life addiction-free forever? What would help you? What would serve you there? So what does it take to overcome addiction in relation to our plan? I can tell you it's great execution. If you execute on your plan, that is the key thing to overcome addiction. You've got to stick to your plan. And I can tell you from all the experience I've had of working with clients and in my own recovery, the breakdown of your recovery plan, the lapse, is going to be either down to one of 2 things. It's going to be down to your plan. You either haven't got one, or you're not using the right tactics or system, or your execution, you're just not doing it. Because if you really have got a plan and you follow it, you can absolutely overcome addiction, any addiction. So when you have a plan and you're 100% disciplined, 100% responsible, and 100% committed, obviously, you will secure freedom from any addiction. I can absolutely guarantee that. When you were born without habits. All your habits have been learned. You weren't born with addiction. Addiction has become a learned habit. You've whether it's picking up that drink every day, you've learned it and then conditioned yourself, or smoking a cigarette, or taking effects, or shopping, or gambling. These are learned habits which have become compulsive because we have ingrained them into our brain by repeating them. And there's a great quote, which I think was originally Buddha, although lots of people have used it. It's like, first we create our habits and then our habits create us. And when we know that, that's a great way then to start us in our recovery from addiction or changing our habits. Because if you accept addiction is a big habit, you can start to create new habits. And a new habit takes between 21 and 30 days, but to make it a lifestyle change takes around 90 days. So you need to really ingrain it in. And that's where, again, hypnotherapy can really, really help you. But the truth is that resisting an old habit by willpower is not creating a new habit. That's just like white knuckling it. You've got to create these new habits. It's like, you look in a forest, you can see a path. That's your neural pathway in your brain. That was your habit, and you're creating a new one. And that old one is still going to be there for a period of time. So you've got to create a new one, and that takes persistence. It takes repetition. So you've got to follow your plan consistently, day after day. And that's why your plan is essential, because without the plan, without your tactics, you're not going to overcome addiction. Everything is a habit. And you can literally be, do, have anything you want in your life, including overcoming any addiction when you make a habit of it. And, I've mentioned, I think it was podcast episode 3, where I spoke about the be, do, have model, which you can use as part of your addiction recovery. You've got to be that ex-addict in your mind. I mean, I personally don't consider myself in recovery. I'm very much of the belief that I'm an ex-addict. So I'm being that ex-addict in my mind. That's the way I personally operate, and that's the way I've seen many other successful people operate. But however you want to use it, the be, do, have model is going to get you the end result, because you're operating from where you want to be in the future. You're being that person in your mind first, and you're going to be inspired to take the right action. So if you haven't been on podcast 3, all about the be, do, have model, I recommend that you jump on it. Because it's your reptilian brain that, is keeping you stuck. It thinks that all your habits, including addiction, they're like survival mechanisms, and your reptilian brain is the oldest part of your brain. And, it's too big a subject to go into on this podcast. Maybe we'll talk about that in a separate one. But you need to learn about how your brain works, and that will help you in your recovery. But again, we don't need to overthink all this. Your plan, your routines and rituals, which are part of your plan, they're giving you the foundations, because when you follow those, they're your stepping stones. When you follow your plan with whatever tactics you choose, which are the ones which are best for you, you will overcome addiction. See, people who fail in life, who give up on their dreams, they're doing it because they are linking pain to them. And the same applies for addicts. Addicts who fail to overcome addiction, it's because they're linking pain to their recovery. They're adopting old beliefs that it's hard or impossible to recover. It's too painful to recover. But when you follow a plan, it's helping you to see the pleasure on the other side of the plan, which is to overcome your addiction. And again, I want to say this one more time. Look, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. You've got to have a plan. I really trust that you've got that, and you adopt the 12-week year, because it is the most phenomenal system I've seen, and it is definitely the best way, the best plan, I think, because you want to get out of addiction in the shortest possible time frame. Jim Rohn, the late Jim Rohn, late great I should say, he said, never start your day until you finish it on paper, which again reinforces the whole planning concept. I would take that a step further. Never start your day until you've finished it in your mind. So, always set an intention at the beginning of every day. Set an intention for what your day is going to be like, and follow your plan, because when you follow your plan, when you've set your 3 primary objectives for the day and you really follow through and you achieve them, you're going to feel so much better at the end of the day. And you can build, it's a building block. You're not looking for perfection, you're looking for progress, and your plan gets you there. And ultimately, you will, if you follow your plan, you will be addiction free, and it can happen naturally. So I hope that going through all of this, today has really helped you. You must set a plan, and I highly recommend that you use the 12-week year as set out by Brian Moran. There's a book you could get a book on Amazon. I have the Kindle book of that. That was my foundation, but I've told you the summary of it. You could start it straight away. You just follow your plan for 12 weeks. So you've got your 12 weeks and your 13th week. The reason I mentioned 13, your 13th week is actually like a week where you consolidate. So set your 12-week plan, understand what your routines are, and then build the ones which are really important into rituals, and then literally live those rituals every day, and you will definitely find a benefit. And people talk about morning rituals and evening rituals, and I haven't specifically mentioned that today, but I always like to set my day up. So I do, many of my rituals are in the earlier part of my day. But I don't, for instance, I don't like say I must do everything first thing, but you definitely want to have something that really makes you feel good at the beginning of the day. So even if you have to get up early and shoot out the door to work, you really want to have some short exercise, even if it's only 5 minutes, that really sets you up for success at the beginning of every day, because that carries you through. So I am absolutely sure that if you follow this, what you've learned on this podcast today, it will actually help you transform your life, not just overcoming addiction, but planning and having rituals in your life will lead you to a better life for sure. They certainly have for me, and I know they have for many, many people as well. And there is a great movement around the 12-week year process. So Brian Moran does lots of training on that. So it's worth looking that up further. So I hope this has helped. I know if you put it into action, it's absolutely going to fast track your recovery. If you want to reach out to me, if you really would like some one-on-one hand holding, then reach out to me. You can contact me at graeme@graemehoppitt.com, or you can contact me through Facebook or LinkedIn. All the links will be somewhere below or somewhere on this podcast. So reach out, because there is no faster way of overcoming addiction than actually getting someone to help you through it. So have a great day. I'm wishing you a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, but absolutely know that you can become addiction-free naturally, and absolutely know that you could do that within a 12-week period. You could set yourself up for success. You could quit addiction, and you could learn the processes to enable you to stay addiction-free forever. Have a wonderful day. Graeme Hoppitt from the Addiction Free Naturally podcast.